Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here. Today we are going to be going over my ban list prediction for the June 2020 ban list. Or rather, as you guys can tell by the title of this video, my unban list prediction. So I think that even though we don't have real life events going on at the moment, we are still going to be getting a ban list within the next month or so. It's supposed to be out around June 1st, but they might give it to us a little bit earlier, or they might delay it until the official release of Eternity Code. Now, the reason that I call it an unban list is that I think that we're not going to see very many big hits or bans. We literally just got Eldritch and Adamanticators in Secret Slayers and haven't had any real life events since then, so it doesn't really make sense to hit either deck that hard since most people haven't even had a chance yet to play with the physical cards. Rather, I think we're going to see a couple of different problem cards addressed on the list, just smaller tweaks here or there, and at the same time I think that we will see a lot of cards brought off the ban list in order to make different decks a little bit more viable. Without real life events, one of the ways that Konami can help to ensure that people are interested in the game is by bringing back these older cards and strategies, by releasing certain cards back to the player base. A lot of older fan favorite decks that are no longer meta can have their cards given back to them without having a big consequence on the meta, and doing so at a time like this would definitely help to keep people interested in the game as they look to revitalize their old strategies. So with that out of the way, let's jump into my prediction list. Alright, so we're starting off with banned cards, and the first card that I have banned is Mutling Galatia, the Elemental Lord. Now, I don't know how controversial of a pick this is because I know a lot of people really like Mermails, but I believe that Mutling Galatia is a card that is a little bit too powerful in Mermails given the consistency with which they can access it. One of the most frustrating things in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is having your hand ripped apart before even having the chance to play, which we've seen from decks like Dark Synchro and Windups in formats past. With Deep Sea Diva going to 3 as well as them getting Deep Sea Aria, Mermails can very easily get access to Mutling Galatia with just one card and use it to rip 2 cards out of your opponent's hand. This, combined with cards like Trishula, Omega, and Desert Locust, mean that you can easily get rid of your opponent's entire hand before they even have a chance to play. And with something like Deep Sea Minstrel in the game as well, you can even get rid of your opponent's Effect Veiler or Infinite Impermanence that they would be using to counter the Mutling Galatia. Altogether, I think that this is a more degenerate strategy that I would rather not see in the game. Now, on the flip side of this is that Mermails haven't really done anything too amazing recently, even in online tournaments, so maybe they're not as problematic as other hand looping decks that came out before them. And of course, if you have a second copy of Impermanence or Veiler to play around this, or you have an Ash Blossom that you do manage to hit the Dragoons with so they can't search Mutling Galatia, you can potentially play around it, so it's not like there's no counterplay. However, if you don't have some way to stop Mutling Galatia, a lot of the time you find yourself stuck without the ability to play the game at all, and for that reason I have Mutling Galatia banned. Next up, we have Jet Synchron banned as well. So let me preface this by saying that I don't think that Jet Synchron is an inherently broken card. Needle Fiber is. Cards like Glow Up Bulb and Steam the Cloak, which were previously hit, are broken because of something like Needle Fiber being in the game, so you could definitely argue that Needle Fiber is the thing that should be banned instead of them. But of course, being a relatively new card here in the TCG, and given how long Needle Fiber has been out in the OCG for without being hit at all, I don't think we're likely to see it hit anytime soon, so we need to address some of the cards around it instead. I feel like in hitting Jet Synchron, we're hitting something that should have been addressed on the previous ban list preemptively, but was kind of overlooked or forgotten. Now, in terms of value, this card functions very similarly to Glow Up Bulb, which is also banned. You could argue for some of the other cards being the ones that should be banned, cards like Auroradon or O-Lion, but Auroradon is a relatively new card, and O-Lion has a reprint coming up in the next Battles of Legends set. So I think it's very unlikely that either of those cards get hit, and I think that Jet Synchron is going to be the casualty instead. Jet Synchron is a 1-card starter that kicks off that entire Synchro combo play that is also searchable off of tuning. Without Jet Synchron, the same plays are still possible, you just have to get into your combo in different ways, perhaps some that are a little bit easier to disrupt. I think that Jet Synchron is another card that helps to push Needle Fiber over the top a little bit too far, and therefore will be banned as well. The last ban card we have here is Block Dragon. Now, firstly, I would like to apologize to all of you Megalith players that depend on Block Dragon in order to have your deck function. I know this is a fairly big loss for you guys, and I understand that Adamancepators are a new deck, and we haven't even had time to play with the cards in real life, so a lot of people are probably going to be reluctant to touch anything in the deck at all. I believe, though, that Block Dragon should be banned for the same reason that the TCG did things like limiting preparation of rights in Necroz's format, to get rid of a card that is going to be overly abused by the deck early on. I think that the fact that you can set up a fairly decent board, get hit by Nibiru, and then continue playing because Block Dragon is going to search 3 different extenders out of your deck is a little bit insane. And while you can get around this by playing something like Ash Blossom, keep in mind that the deck also runs Kwakimaru Guardian, which can help to ensure that Block Dragon resolves. In a combo deck, the fact that you can build a decent board of 4 or 5 monsters, have 3 or 4 cards still in your hand, and then search out an additional 3 cards is kind of ridiculous. Now, I'm not 100% sure on this hit because I think there is a chance that Konami will want to give players an opportunity to play with Adamancepators in real life at full power before hitting them in any way on the list. And also, let's be clear, with Block Dragon, it's either at 3 or 0, right? Limiting it doesn't really make any sense at all because you always have access to it through either Union Carrier or Gallant Granite, and I think some builds even cut Block Dragon down to 1 already, but I think that banning Block Dragon is how you get rid of the most broken piece of a top tier deck, but you still allow the deck to hit the ground running when events do start back up again. Alright guys, we are on to the limited cards now, and the first one I have here is Magical Meltdown. Now, I'm a really big fan of the Invoked engine. I've actually spent a lot of time playing Mech Knight Invoked over the last year or so. I don't think that the Invoked engine is ridiculously broken or anything like that. Rather, it's a really strong, consistent engine that adds an extra dimension to different decks. We've seen it combined with archetypes like Mech Knights, Shaddolls, and Eldritch, where it can take up that normal summon slot that is otherwise not necessary, and it also puts out free bodies onto the board without requiring much in terms of additional resources. Now, I think that the Invoked engine is going to be hit because of just how splashable and strong it is. It gives so many other different decks the ability to get up a free Mechaba on board as well as set up a play for the following turn, and I think that when you give every single other deck the ability to do that so consistently with just 1 card, it needs to be addressed. So I'm choosing to hit Meltdown, though I think that Invocation could be the other card that's chosen to be hit. None of the extra deck monsters are ridiculously overpowered, so I think that they're all relatively safe. Invocation I considered hitting because the ability to fuse multiple times if you happen to hard draw Invocation is really strong, right? You make Mechaba, you re-add the Alistair, pitch the Alistair to boost the Mechaba, and then make Purgatrio. That's a lot of damage to generate just off of Alistair and Invocation in your hand. However, I think that hitting Meltdown and therefore hitting the consistency of the Invoked engine is the way to go. Now the engine is much more restricted, right? Because you have the 3 Alistair, 1 Terraforming, and 1 Meltdown. That's all that you can use to get into that engine, which means you're hitting it less consistently. Also, limiting Invocation potentially makes it difficult to play the engine at all because a single DD Crow on the Invocation kills that part of the deck entirely. So yeah, I think that a big part of why the Invoked engine is so heavily abused is the consistency that it provides to other decks, and therefore hitting their key consistency card will help to limit the engine from being abused so much. Okay, so next, I think it's time that we brought another Dragon Ruler off the ban list, and I think that the safest one for us to bring out next is Blaster, Dragon Ruler of Infernos. So I believe that of all the Dragon Rulers, Blaster is the one that is safest to bring off of the list, as it's the one that's least likely to be abused by a deck in the current meta. On one hand, I can't really think of any fire decks that are tearing things up at the moment, or would tear things up if Blaster were reintroduced, whereas I think that Mermails would love Tidal, and Adamancepators would absolutely abuse Redox, so I think we should hold off on the other 2 for now. At the same time, I don't really believe that Blaster's pop effect is really that broken at all. In most cases, you're gonna do what? Pitch Blaster and an Ash Blossom to pop a card. Like, that's it. That's kind of like a weaker version of what Eldritch already does, so I don't think it's really something that I would call problematic. But yeah, I think that bringing back Blaster would add a bit of excitement to the game, as well as people maybe look at trying to use both Blaster and Tempest in a deck like Rockets, which would be really interesting to see. Alright, and one last limited card here, we have Danlong, First of the Yang Zing. To be completely honest, I don't think that Danlong really needed to be banned at all in the first place. It really just searched for the counter trap and then kind of stopped your turn there. Sure, it's a generic level 5 synchro monster, but it didn't feel like a particularly strong play. Well, now that we have Needle Fiber here in the TCG, I think that it would be fairly safe to bring back a card like Danlong because of how generic Needle Fiber is. Anytime that you could make Danlong, you could have gone into Needle Fiber instead, but that Needle Fiber line of play would basically always provide a ton more value. If you're summoning Danlong, unless you're playing pure Yang Zing, right, you're almost certainly stopping on it because you need it if you want to be able to resolve the counter trap. Also worth noting is that Destrudo is now banned, so you can't even dump it with Danlong, and as a result, the list of potential cards that you could dump and abuse with Danglong's effect is very, very small. Finally, I don't think that pure Yang Zing or Metal Foe Yang Zing is a deck that is really going to take over the meta or anything if Danlong does come back, so I do think that now is the perfect time to give all of those pure Yang Zing fans access to Danlong once again. Alright, onto the semi-limits here. We're starting off with another card that is a key card in a fan favorite deck, and that is Graf, Malla Branch of the Burning Abyss. Now, Burning Abyss is a deck that has always been popular with a lot of the player base, and has actually done reasonably well over the past several years, despite seeing Graf, Seer, and Beatrice all limited to 1. However, we haven't really seen Burning Abyss do anything recently, and I feel like that's largely because the Burning Abyss cards just don't do enough anymore, especially compared to some of the other meta decks that we have. I think that even when we were seeing BA have some success within the last year, they would only run 1 or 2 copies of Dante and a smaller Burning Abyss engine and focus on combining the deck with other cards in order to win games. That being said, I think that now would be a great time to give Burning Abyss a bit of a bump up by moving Graf up to semi-limited. Graf is a really key card for the deck, helping to pull a monster directly out of your deck onto the field, and while that may have been really strong before, it definitely isn't anymore. It's really just like a weaker version of Needle Fiber, since there aren't as many great targets for you to bring out of your deck. At most, you're getting a Revival with Seer, a temporary Banish with Farfa, or a search for a follow-up tour guide on your next turn with Skarm, none of which is really that threatening. I think that it's fairly safe to say that bringing Graf to 2 would be a great thing for the player base, as a lot of people probably want to try out Burning Abyss once again, though it's by no means something that is going to take over the meta. Next is A Hero Lives, which was also limited, and I have it going to semi-limited status as well. So this card was put to 1 back when Stratos first came off the ban list, I guess as a way to stop heroes from getting too out of hand, and the deck was interesting. Certainly it did see some success last format, though I wouldn't say it was tier 1, it was always kind of tier 1.5, tier 2. Well, now on the previous list we saw Destiny Hero Malicious go to 2, and that has kind of stopped heroes from seeing any sort of success. Even in online tournaments, where the huge price tags of a Dusted Gold and Malicious Bane don't matter anymore, heroes have been a fan favorite archetype ever since they first came out, and Konami has been pretty good about giving them constant support over the years. However, with the deck underperforming currently and no immediate plans for any support for the deck, I think the deck would certainly benefit from an extra copy of A Hero Lives. It would certainly boost the deck's consistency by giving them an extra copy of Stratos or Shadow Mist directly from the deck, and also giving them an extra body on board to use as an extender. So yeah, I think it would be a bit of a boost, though it probably still won't be enough to make the deck top tier, or even as good as it was last format. Alright, last semi-limited card we have here is Pantheism of the Monarchs. Monarchs are a deck that haven't really done anything for the past few years, and I think that the game has kind of moved past the point where Monarchs can be a scary deck. I mean, the domain lock isn't nearly as oppressive as when Domain Monarchs were such a strong deck. We see Buster Whelp running around with Union Carrier in the game right now, and while it can be annoying, there are still ways to get around it with cards like Cosmic Cyclone or Eldritch, and the domain lock would be no different. There's also the fact that Monarchs are largely restricted by how dependent they are on their 1 or 2 normal summons, which in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! Is kind of a really big handicap. Honestly, Pantheism could go to 3 and still be fine, but let's say that it should go to 2 first, and then 3 just to ease it into the meta. Okay, so now we're on to the unlimited cards. I don't really have too much to say about each of these, so we'll kind of go through them quickly. So Dynamite Knight, the True Draco Fighter, is currently limited, but I think it can definitely go to 3 without much of a problem. We have Masterpiece banned and Dragonic Diagram limited, and Skill Drain is still at 1. So honestly, I feel like we don't really need to worry about True Dracos doing anything crazy this format. I feel like it could have gone to 3 right when Diagram went to 1 and still had little to no impact on the meta. So Performapal Skullcrabat Joker is probably one of the more controversial picks on my ban list overall, probably because I think it should be going right from banned to unlimited status. So I actually feel like pendulums have been getting abused by the ban list a lot recently. They saw Servant of Endymion Unlimited, which some people were kind of thrown off by, including myself, and also Electromite was banned, which hurt every single pendulum deck's ability to get key pendulum monsters into the extra deck. So looking at what Joker does for pendulums, I think it's a good card for pendulum magicians and whatnot, but even at 3, it's not going to take them to the next level or anything like that. As it is, the deck kind of lacks a really solid normal summon among other things, and this just helps them to search for the necessary scale in order to ensure that they're able to pendulum summon and be able to do what their strategy wants them to do in the first place. Joker also does have that restriction while it's in the scale, locking you into pendulum summoning only Magician, Performapal, and Odd Eyes monsters. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure about this one, but I think that this would give pendulums the biggest boost without setting them over the edge. I mean, realistically, you could also look at cards like Double Iris Magician or Plushfire, but neither of those are really going to help make pendulum decks become that much better at all. So I have Joker going to 3 and leaving the other pendulum cards as is for now. Alright, so just 2 other unlimited cards here, and I don't think either of them really matter that much. Daigusto Emerald is currently at 1, and I think people thought it was going to be a really big card when it first came off the list, but really it hasn't done anything at all. I don't think I've seen a single top deck list running it, and really if no one's running it at 1, I don't think anyone is going to bother playing multiples of it. Widow Anchor is the last card here, which kind of just feels natural after it went from limited to semi-limited on the last list without really having any impact. Realistically, we could also see Multi-Roll gradually moved off the list as well, but I figured we should move Widow Anchor off completely first. Really, we haven't seen Sky Strikers do anything with Engage Band, even though Kagari just went back to 3, and I don't think that the deck is going to do anything moving forward either. The Sky Striker cards might make interesting tech options in really spell-heavy decks if we see something like that in the future, but as the meta is, I don't think Sky Strikers are anything that we need to worry about. Anyways guys, that is it for my ban list prediction video. I know some of these things I felt were pretty self-explanatory, and other things I felt like they might be weird choices, but these are basically my thoughts on kind of what the problematic cards of the meta are, and also my ideas for how Konami could best keep the game interesting for all of us as players. Now, if you guys did enjoy the discussion today, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me, and also please let me know in the comments section down below what you guys think is going to happen on the upcoming ban list, like whether or not we're actually going to get one, as well as what you guys think they will hit or give back to us. And of course, guys, to make sure that you're up to date with all of the latest Yu-Gi-Oh content, please make sure that you're subscribed to MST.TV for all of the latest content from Tombox and myself. And yeah, so until next time, guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.